Hi, I'm Teddy.
And I'm Arthur.
And you're listening to
Two Blondes Talking Politics.
Are you listening?
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm here in this segment with my co-host, Sophie, and joining us today is Top Rope Travis. Some of you may know him from Twitter. Hi, Travis.
Hey, ladies. It's Top Rope Travis, Kelly, Sophie. It's so great to be here with you tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. So we've been talking about doing this for a little while, so it's great that we're finally making this happen. So we're going to talk tonight about veterans issues, but I'm sure, given all the news, some other topics may come up as well. But Travis, maybe you can just give us a little bit of background about, your relationship with working with veterans issues.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to thank you again for having me on tonight. Congratulations. When I first did following you guys and listening, you had less than 10,000 followers, and now you're up to 19,000, and you've had so many great guests on. And your work during the midterms was just phenomenal, highlighting candidates on your show and providing them a platform to get their message out. So I just want to congratulate you guys on your success. But with the veterans issues, I myself am a Navy veteran. I was a naval officer. So these are all issues that hit home close to me because not only are they important to me, but they apply to me and my family as well. So I try my best to stay in tune with legislation and policy that pertains to veterans and how that impacts the veteran community. We are less than 1% of the U.S. population. I always call ourselves an elite fraternity because we are such a small population. But the issues that impact veterans are huge. And so that's why I try to stay in tune. That's why I try to remain active and to advocate for the policies and legislation that is going to best benefit those who have worn the cloth of our nation.
Well, thank you so much for those very nice words. And thank you, too, for your service. So I know that there's a lot of talk about the VA. It seems like there's always a lot of talk about the VA in general, but especially in the past 2 years, through a change of leadership, and then there's this shadow leadership that's part of Mar-a-Lago. But what is the sort of average veteran's relationship with the VA? In what ways do they interact with the VA on a daily basis? Just want to sort of set the stage a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we currently have 19 million veterans in the United States. And out of those 19 million, nearly 5 million are receiving VA disability compensation. We have over 3 million that are seen on an annual basis in the United States at a VA facility, whether that's actually at a hospital or at an outpatient site or a veterans center. When veterans leave their active service, by default, they become automatically engaged with the Veterans Administration due to benefits that they are entitled to, due to medical services for those who retired with honorable discharges. So most veterans have a fairly frequent and close relationship with the Veterans Administration.
And you mentioned that extends to family of veterans as well. What are the kinds of things that a veteran's families might be interacting with the VA?
That's a great question. So a lot of veterans, especially those who are older in age or those who have experienced a disability due to service-related injuries, their families are their advocate. They are their voice. They are the ones who transport them to their appointments, to go see specialists, to go see mental health counselors. So spouses, children, aunts, uncles, they're all closely entwined with this veteran family, and especially with the VA, because in my case, I remember before my grandfather passed years ago, I would take him to his appointments at the Veterans Administration in Virginia So it's definitely a family affair. We all get involved. And it's not just for taking our family members to appointments or being their vocal advocate. There are also family members who, unfortunately, their loved one paid the ultimate sacrifice. But as a result of that, they are entitled to additional benefits that the VA provides to them to help care for them and to make sure that they are financially provided for their life in the absence of their loved one. So it's definitely an entity that involves family activity as well.
So there was a story fairly recently, and I'm not sure that it's been resolved yet, but that the VA computer system was having trouble figuring out how to keep up with new laws in terms of tuition and housing allowances for people who are students and who are receiving VA benefits. Do you know what the status of that is, or just more generally, what is the relationship between the VA and students? What do those kinds of benefits look like, or how many people might be affected by something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, this debacle with the software issues and the payments is just factoring into pretty much a history of issues that the VA has experienced over the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. I myself am someone who was able to earn both my bachelor's and graduate degree because of funding from the VA with the GI Bill. So I understand the process. What's unfortunate in this situation is the military members, both active, retired, and veterans, who depend on the monies from the VA to pursue their educational goals, was tied up into this. And there were months that have passed that students were not receiving their payments from the VA in order to continue their education. And unfortunately, what the VA has said in the last couple of weeks is they admitted they made the mistake, but they're not making it right. And they're not going to make these payments that these veterans are entitled to with the service that they gave our country. So that's something that the incoming Congress is going to have to work with. I personally believe that there should be an independent investigation into the issue, and then there should be an explanation from Secretary Wilkie as to why veterans are not going to receive these monies that they have earned so honorably and bravely. So I'm looking forward to the 116th Congress to look into this and to hold the Secretary of Veterans Affairs accountable and to ensure that our veterans are receiving what they're entitled to.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I work in higher education, and so I have had some experience, although not a lot, given the division I'm in, with working with VA benefits for our students. I haven't yet come across this particular issue, but I think one of the things that happens is probably a lot of schools, at least for the tuition portion of it, a lot of schools are going to be willing to, as much as they can, sort of hold off on receiving payments and not let the students suffer. But that's only to the extent that the schools are aware of it, right? I mean, if they're also not sending out memos to the schools saying, here's why the payment hasn't come yet, here's when you can expect it, then that can be very difficult for people to work with. And, students having to advocate for themselves and why the money isn't in could be very tricky.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And most schools that receive payments from the VA directly on behalf of the student, they have an agreement in place with the Department of Veteran Affairs. So as you stated and alluded to, I think that most schools, or at least I would hope, they are willing to work with those individual students. I believe that a majority of our schools across this nation truly appreciate what those students bring, not only from their service, but the diversity and the experience that they bring to the classroom as well. And I hope that they will continue to work with those students to allow them to continue to pursue goals in the meantime while the VA and Congress is working through this issue.
So as our listeners will know, I work in healthcare, so I'm interested in talking a little bit about the challenges facing veterans in terms of healthcare. I know in 2014 there was a huge scandal with the Veterans Health Administration over being very slow to schedule veterans for their healthcare visits. As a result, some people may or may not have died. I know that also many veterans face difficulties getting treatment for things like PTSD or for injuries that they received while they were on active duty. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about things that you think the federal government could be doing to improve healthcare for veterans.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I believe, unfortunately, you are correct that human life was lost because of the issues and the administrative problems that the VA was facing with the waiting times, with being able to have referrals for specialists for those who had specific medical issues that needed care outside of the VA system. And it's just very unfortunate because those who served this country, I believe, and I think a majority of America believes, deserves much better than that. And they deserve the care that is afforded to them through their service. So that's quite unfortunate. But I think some of the issues, hopefully, will be resolved with the funding increases that we've seen for the next fiscal year 19. So from fiscal year 18, which the VA received $188 billion. Fiscal year 19, they're budgeted to receive $198 billion. So the increase in funding will hopefully help to alleviate some of those issues. A change in leadership, I'm hoping, will also help with a new focus, a new direction, and having the VA held accountable for the processes that are in place to ensure that the proper care is given and that the proper benefits are administered the way that they were designed to be. With Secretary Wilkie in place now, we are seeing some positive change in the VA and a direction towards what our veterans should be experiencing. But a lot of issues that the vets are facing these days, like PTSD and traumatic brain injuries and substance abuse, these are all issues that are at the top of what needs to be addressed right now. So a lot of times we talk about the healthcare system of the VA, and we talk about the services provided from physicians, but we also need to take into consideration some of the other issues as well, like homelessness and the suicide rate. Suicide right now is such a big problem for our veterans in active duty military. Over 6,000 veterans a year are ending their life from suicide, and that's 6,000 too many. We've heard a statistic that up to 22 veterans a day are taking their life because they just don't feel that there's any other way to face their problems, and that's the only thing they see that they can do to escape. So in addition to the healthcare issues and the other benefit issues, we need to look into the full spectrum of care that we can give to our veterans who are experiencing issues like that in their life.
You mentioned the new leadership in the new Congress. One thing we saw this year was an increasing number of veterans who are themselves running for office, both at the congressional level but up and down the ballot. And what was interesting to note was that so many of them were running as Democrats. Do you think that while we have traditionally thought of the military as sort of Republican, right-leaning, is that something that's changing a little bit? Is there something going on with more veterans being Democrats, or is it just the veterans who are Democrats are more likely to run? Do you have any sense of what might be going on there?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of statistics on this. Even the Military Times released a survey recently that shows a shift in the ideals of our current military members, where it's becoming a more liberalized military. I would contribute that shift to the experience of diversity. You have young 18 and 19-year-olds coming from small towns who are being exposed to different cultures, different races, different religions, and they're finding the value in that diversity, and their worldview is changing because what they knew growing up in a small, secluded area that might perhaps have been a more conservative area, they're experiencing these different backgrounds, and they're finding the value and the beauty in and they're realizing that there's so much more to be gained through a progressive outlook. And I see that translating to public service as well. You mentioned our veterans serving in Congress. With the incoming Congress, we have 95 veterans who will be serving this year. That's 18% of the Congress made up by veterans. So while only 1% of the nation has served, we have 18% of our Congress made up of veterans, which is very significant. Unfortunately, that's a slight decrease, whether it's through retirement or defeat in campaigns. We lost 7 of those veterans, so we had 7 more in the previous Congress. And then looking back historically, if you look back at Vietnam, right after the Vietnam War ended, nearly 75% of Congress had some type of military experience. So we've seen a decrease in experience from the military in Congress. But just like you said, we saw a huge boost in veterans running for office this year, especially Iraqi war and Afghanistan war veterans. And another thing that I think is very significant we should note is the incoming Congress will boast the largest amount of female veterans that we've ever seen in the U.S. history. There's going to be 6 female veterans serving in the 116th Congress, which I think is just amazing. 19 freshman Congress people coming in are veterans. But like you said, looking at it through a historical lens, the Republican Party has had more veterans serve, and that still is the case today with 65 Republicans that are veterans serving compared to 30 Democratic persons in Congress who were veterans. But we're seeing that increase. And again, that goes back to discovering the value of diversity and people seeing the direction that this country is taking under the Trump administration, not being satisfied with that at all and being fearful for our country's future, and those veterans doing what they do and stepping up to the plate and leading from the front. And so I think we're going to see a continuation of veterans who step up and they take that plunge into public service through campaigning and hopefully to election. And, you know, we have some amazing veterans who are serving right now, like Ted Lieu and Max Rose and so many others, Connor Lamb and Tammy Duckworth. And we're going to see these leaders of Congress who are Democrats with a veteran background take the lead, our legislative and policy introductions that we have this next year.
And what are some of the things that you think that Congress might look at, not just in terms of veterans, but also in terms of active duty personnel? Are there issues that sort of cross both with active duty and veterans, things that the Congress should be looking at, should be thinking about? One of the issues that comes to my mind, especially you noted the number of women veterans who are going to be in this Congress. And, you know, there are still issues in the military with sexual harassment and, you know, with women then facing PTSD, not just because of their military service, but also because of, sometimes because of PTSD. But I don't know if there are other issues, too, that you think that this Congress may be well suited to tackling.
Yeah, a couple of issues come to mind right off the bat. You mentioned sexual harassment, sexual assault is still an issue in our military. The service chiefs take this very seriously, and they recognized the problem, especially during the last, 16, 17 years that we've been at war. They've recognized that we had a cultural issue within the military that was enabling sexual harassment and sexual assaults. And they recognized this about 4 or 5 years ago. And under the Obama administration, this was something that was elevated as a priority for a culture shift and a culture change. And many training programs were put into place to bring awareness to the issue, but to also help identify the issue when it's occurring. One of the sayings that we had when I was serving was there's bystander intervention. And being a bystander or intervening as a bystander is always authorized. So it's playing off of this. You see something, say something. So if you see something going on, step in and intervene. And that's part of the training process. But they've also improved the reporting processes. So for those victims and survivors of sexual assault and sexual harassment, those processes are in place now, and all of our soldiers, Marines, airmen, and sailors have been trained so that they know the proper process and procedures so that, justice can be served in those situations, and then services can be provided on following services for victims through the recovery phases, whether that's through counseling and expedited transfer. So the military is combating this issue head on. It's not acceptable. It's not tolerated. And I'm proud of my colleagues who are still serving for stepping up and ensuring that the environment that the military personnel serve in is one that's safe and one that they can feel proud to serve in. Another issue I think that this incoming Congress and our military can work together that crosses both boundaries of active duty and military is our issues with PTSD and suicide. As we were talking about previously with the healthcare system in the VA, those issues apply to our active duty service members as well. We have been at war. We're a nation at war for 17 straight years now. We have high school seniors who are born into a culture of war. And we have people who will be joining our military this year who weren't even alive when 9/11 happened, but yet the war continues on. And one of the big impacts and after effects of war is the PTSD, and it's leading to so many other secondary and tertiary issues. I read a statistic recently that 20% of our veterans in active duty who have served in Iraq or Afghanistan suffer from major depression or PTSD. And out of that group, 25% showed signs of substance abuse, which includes not only alcohol, but opioids. And we're all familiar with the opioid crisis that our nation is facing right now. So we really need to continue to work towards mental health services and providing that service to our active duty members and veterans. That way we can ensure that they are taken care of holistically, not that we're just providing them armor in the battlefield, but that we're also providing them armor for their mentality and their emotional state as well.
What would you think that the veterans that you know think about President Trump's proposed military parade?
That was a very unpopular proposal, both Democratic and Republican, both active duty and veteran. When the DoD initially released their estimated cost for the parade, that was astronomical, but when what the actual cost appeared to be, it was just a complete waste of taxpayer funds, all to serve the ego of a president who wanted to play with his toy soldiers. It truly served no purpose for strategic messaging to any of our adversaries across seas. It wasn't a show to reassure our allies and partner nations. This was all just going to be an event that fed the ego of President Trump. So fortunately, I am very happy, to be here today without having seen this military parade take place, all just to serve the personal interest of a person who has an inflated ego.
What, in general, is the sort of attitude of active duty and veterans toward Trump? Is there support? Is it mixed? Are there people who are concerned about him being the commander in chief, or is there sort of this is the order that we follow? What's sort of the general sense?
Yeah, his support among the military was where it stands traditionally under a Republican president at the beginning of their term. So it was upwards of 60% at the beginning of his term. Military Times released a new poll last month that has shown a steady decrease in support to where now his support among active duty military is actually 1% lower than what President Obama's was when President Obama left office 2 years ago. And that support continues to decrease rapidly. And I think that is the result of a recognition of incompetence and a result of realizing that this commander-in-chief does not have the best interest of the military in mind, despite the rhetoric that he spews at his rallies and on Twitter. we've seen a decrease in support among veterans as well. He has the lowest support of a Republican president among veterans in over 40 years. And I think a lot of this plays into some of the faults of himself he's displayed both on Twitter and on stage. When you look at some of the things he said, for example, insulting the Kahn family, a Gold Star family, or making Misha Johnson cry, the wife of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson. And these events that are highly publicized really shines a light on who he really is as a person. While he says he loves the military and he supports veterans, the actions speak louder than words. When you say you don't like people who get captured, or you want to bar transgender service members, these are not the actions and the words of somebody who truly supports and loves their military. And of course, that's something that you would expect from someone who managed to dodge the draft 5 times. So, I don't see support holding steady. It's steadily decreasing based on polling, based on sentiment among both our active duty and veterans.
What are some of the things that you would recommend we do to be as supportive of veterans as possible? So what are some of the kinds of things, either through nonprofits or by contacting our congresspeople that all of us can be doing to help support veterans?
The best thing you can do is to be informed and to be aware of the issues that veterans are facing today. While veterans typically love to be told, thank you for your service, we do love hearing that. But what we would really love to see is the public really getting behind some of these issues, for example, suicide prevention and enabling the VA to better treat our veterans. Just the awareness is something that everyone can do. You can go on to va.gov and become familiar with the programs that are available to veterans to find out what services are offered. And then they also have links there that offer you advice and ways to get involved through volunteering. But there's a lot of great nonprofits and organizations right now in America that are serving our veterans. And a couple come to mind immediately right off the bat. Canines for Warriors is a great organization based out of Florida. You can find out more information from them at caninesforwarriors.org. But they provide service canines to our military who are suffering from PTSD and TBI and sexual trauma. And they're just a great organization. And what I love about this specific organization is not only do they serve our veterans, but they help rescue dogs as well. So what they do is they go and identify dogs, whether it be in shelters or ones that are being donated, and they find these dogs who are great candidates to be trained and to serve as comfort animals for our veterans. They've rescued over 956 dogs, of which 499 have been given to veterans to help with their issues. A fantastic organization. Another one is 22kill.com. I was so excited to see my friend Alyssa Milano post about them a few days ago for her birthday. She was raising awareness for specific organizations, and 22Kill was one of the organizations that she brought awareness to. And what this organization does is they raise awareness, and they're going to provide education about veteran suicides and how we can prevent this. And once they have brought this awareness up to the public, then they are in turn able to empower those who are suffering from PTSD and major depression. And they create a sense of purpose for these veterans by getting them involved in community projects and through therapy sessions, and they build their own community of support. So Canine for Warriors and 22Kill are both fantastic organizations that are able to augment and supplement some of the support that's offered from the VA. So if the public just continues to educate themselves, speak to veterans, and find out what issues are important to them, and then in turn take that information and contact your congressmen and contact your senators and let them know, hey, these are the issues that the constituents who have served the country are facing, and this is how we can help them.
And we'll put links up on our website to those organizations as well. And maybe I'll do one of our Knit the Wave fundraisers for those organizations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those knit caps. They're so cute. I think I'm probably going to end up buying one for my wife. She loves those things, so I might just buy one for myself.
That can be arranged. So, Travis, for people who don't know you, they may wonder why you're called Top Rope Travis. Do you want to talk a little bit about your Twitter handle?
Yeah, I get this asked a lot. Everyone's like, where did you come up with this? So, in full disclosure, I grew up as a professional wrestling fan. And yes, I am a grown man, and I still love professional wrestling. It's just something that I watched with my dad and my grandfather growing up. And so in order to kind of tie in that hobby, I guess you'd call it, it's my guilty pleasure. In order to tie that in, I came up with Top Rope Travis. So that's where that came from.
And you previously on Twitter had a profile picture where you were with President Obama. So what is it like to meet President Obama?
Oh, my gosh. To meet, in my opinion, the greatest president of my lifetime was just such a complete honor. It was so humbling to be there in his presence, but yet he's such a humble man. You're kind of intimidated at first because of how tall he is. And I'm kind of a short guy, but when you look at President Obama, he's just this towering person, but yet he's so humble and down to earth that he speaks to you at your level. And it was just such an honor to be able to spend time with him at that specific time that I got to meet the president. We were actually at a campaign rally for Secretary Clinton for her presidential campaign, and he was speaking on her behalf that day. And so we were backstage during our, I guess you'd call it a meet and greet session. And I had a few minutes, and so we kind of discussed a little bit about my military career and what I was able to have done under his administration, because I was fortunate enough to have served under him as my commander-in-chief. I also served under President George W. Bush, but it was a complete honor to serve under him. So I made sure to communicate that to him and to let him know that. But after the formalities were over, we sat and talked about the World Series. Of course, he's a White Sox fan, and his wife is a Cubby fan. And so we talked about the World Series that the Cubs had just won. So it was just a really cool moment to speak to this hero of mine, but it was almost as if we had been lifelong friends. And that's just one of the things that was so great about him, is he connects to people regardless of who they are, where they come from, what their stories are. So it was just a special moment to be able to meet him. And I have to say, as soon as our meeting was over, I nearly broke down, because it was just such a special moment in my mind. And I had that lump built up in my throat, and I'm trying not to cry because there's Secret Service around, and, there's all these military leaders and community leaders. I'm there with, at the time, Alvin Brown, the mayor of Jacksonville, and I'm there with Patrick Murphy, representative from Florida. And I'm like, all right, I need to look strong in front of these people. But, it's just an overwhelming moment emotionally to be there.
That's amazing. I got to very briefly meet Michelle Obama a couple of weeks ago. She was doing a book signing. I was literally in her presence for like 30 seconds, but...
But it was probably like the most glorious 30 seconds you experienced. And her book, Becoming, is so fantastic. I'm on my second time reading it since I've gotten it. Mm-hmm. So First Lady Obama, if you're listening, I would love to meet you.
Likewise. I'd like to interview her. So, their house in Chicago is a walking distance from my house. And, I'm always like, someday they'll come back into town and I'll get to interview them both in person.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, our listeners should tweet at her and be like, hey, Michelle Obama, you should come on Too Broad. Intent.
I co-signed that. So everyone listening tonight, when you hear this interview, immediately log in, and we're all going to tweet to the First Lady and request that they appear with Kelly and Sophie on Two Broads Talking Politics.
My current campaign on Twitter is to try to get us as the hosts of the Oscars.
Hey, you know what? You've probably got about maybe 10% shot at that right now. I hear they have an opening.
I mean, we've got about a 10% shot of being like chief of staff in the White House, too.
Yeah, your chances are probably higher. I think the first person who says yes is getting the job at this point.
I mean, I'm happy to have it offered and get to say no.
I would probably take the job and then just, I don't know, just completely wreck everything I could.
All you have to do is say, "Oh, President Trump, you're so strong and manly and important."
Your
and
hands
then
are
he'll
so
do whatever
big.
you say. Yeah, so then,
Exactly.
we'll have all this great stuff happening. He'll all of a sudden become like a liberal Democrat. It'll be great.
Right. Your hands are so bigly. You should let kids out of cages. Oh, you got it. I love the compliment. Kids are out of cages.
Yep, exactly.
Or you could take the job and then go immediately to Mueller and say, "Hi, can I wear a wire in the White House?" So as we're recording, it is Monday night. So who knows, by the time you're listening to this, maybe there won't be a President Trump anymore. Maybe there will be a new chief of staff. Maybe the Oscars will have gone through 5 more hosts by then.
Welcome to 2018, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh.
Yes. Soon to be 2019. Maybe things will move even faster in the new year.
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be a great year. We have a fantastic Democratic House of Representatives coming in who I know have a lot planned to benefit our nation and to serve our people and to not serve special interests or the gun lobby or the country of Russia. So I'm very excited about what 2019 holds ahead for us. I'm feeling very optimistic, which is something I don't think many of us were feeling before November. I think a lot of us were experiencing a lot of emotional distress. And so a lot of that hope was revived on November 6th. And I'm very excited to see where we are going to improve and take our country back away from bigotry and white supremacists. And it's very exciting. I think that this incoming Congress is going to do great things.
And now we know how to hold them accountable if they don't. And I think none of us ever again will sort of be asleep at the wheel like we clearly were for a long time. It's time that we pay attention to what everybody's doing, including the Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely. We cannot become complacent again. My friend Nick Knudsen, I think you guys had him on recently. He has a very, very consistent message on his Twitter account and through his organization, Dem Right Press. We cannot fall asleep at the wheel again. We have to stay engaged. We have to remain cognizant of what's happening. And we cannot accept what's going on. We have to remain active if we're going to maintain our country as the Constitution has granted us to live, and as our rights as Americans are to embrace and to execute. We have to remain engaged. So it's going to be so important that even though this is not a midterm or presidential election year, can still remain active. There are elections that will take place this year. There's 3 governor's elections that are very important that will take place this year, among other elections. So we have to remain aware and stay involved in the process.
All right. Well, on that note, Travis, thank you so much for joining us. This was really great, and I hope we can check in with you again after this new Congress gets to work and see how they're doing on veterans issues. But thank you so much for talking to us and for paying so much attention and helping us learn more about what's at stake for veterans right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, ladies. This was so much fun talking. Thank you for having me on tonight. Kelly, Sophie, you guys are so great. You're amazing. And congratulations on your success. I look forward to seeing how much Two Broads grows in the next year. And for those who are listening, make sure you tell your friends to subscribe and follow along. This is the best podcast you can listen to.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.